has become so precious.
If you call a piece of wood a child, you can never use it to light a fire since it has become precious. Wakili Wanyama, how do you interpret this proverb?
I'm not a proverbs person, but it's really about relevance. And that's how I see it. Yeah. It's about relevance and situating us it in the context of the legal profession.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a fake advocate, no matter how they call you outside there, the perception, you remain a fake advocate.
Kama wewe ni kuni. Hosea, what's your interpretation?
I think for me, and I don't think it's different from what Senior Wanyama stated. The proverb basically means that you cannot change what you are. Whether you're pampered, whether you're structured in a different way, you'll still remain a firewood. You'll still remain Peter Wanyama. You'll still remain a fake lawyer. Yes.
Wait.
Yani,
we change the way you just said things. You'll still remain Peter Wanyama. You'll still remain
a fake lawyer.
Certainly, I'm not a fake lawyer.
That's what we're
Senior Peter Wanyama, his reputation precedes him. So his name alone means he's an advocate of serious repute. And so I don't need to explain that he's a lawyer in the first place, or a senior lawyer in that matter.
Okay.
Yes.
If you say so.
Yeah.
So anyway, who's a lawyer, who's an advocate, Peter?
In our context, a lawyer is a person who has an LLB degree. But then specific to our jurisdiction, even if you go to other jurisdictions, you'll find that a lawyer is someone who is qualified. But for legal purposes, a lawyer, if you have an LLB degree and you're not admitted to the bar, you can become a journalist, you can become an engineer, pursue a different profession. But the bottom line is that you remain a lawyer. An advocate is a person who has qualified. In Kenya, we have a legal framework, the Advocates Act, which provides for the manner of qualification of an advocate. So once you are admitted into the role, you will sign a roll of advocates before the Chief Justice. Then you are given a practicing certificate number. So then that qualifies you to be an advocate, and every year you must renew that certificate for you to continue to practice. Because you can be an advocate and inactive. That means you can't take up cases, you can't represent anyone, you can't act in a transaction. Okay. So the Law Society of Kenya maintains a database where you can be able to search and check that Peter Wanyama is active, is an advocate but active. You can check that so-and-so is an advocate but not active. That means he's unable to take up cases.
But he's still an advocate.
Yeah, he's still an advocate.
Because he was admitted to the bar.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are procedures for him then to come back into the profession. If, for example, you're an advocate and you go abroad for 6 years to do your master's and PhD, when you come back, you then apply for you to be made active. You apply to the Law Society of Kenya. The council considers your request, and then you made active after you've paid the back fees.
Okay. Yeah. Before you come in. Can you be an active member on the role of advocates, but you're not practicing?
Yes. I can.
So you can just apply, but you just decide.
Yes, so I can be active. For example, now I'm active, but I can take a 6 months break to go to for holiday abroad, but I'm still active. The issue is that you must maintain your active status within that year. So that for this year I'm active. For next year I have to apply in December to be made active for next year.
What is being active? Does being active only mean that you've gone to court?
No, being active means you have paid your PC fees, practicing certificate fees. And you are now recognized under the provisions of the Advocates Act to qualify as an advocate to represent people in court. Remember, let me just mention something here, and it explains why Atwoli is very bitter. Atwoli, who is the Secretary General of Kenya Plantation Workers Union, hired an advocate who did not have a PC, not active. And the matter went to court. We have the citation. And then the court struck out the pleadings. It's a very serious offense. If you file pleadings, then yet you don't have a PC. So the court struck out the pleadings filed by Kenya Plantation Workers Union, where Atwoli is the Secretary General. And that explains his bitterness against the legal profession.
I can imagine why it would. Okay, so then how is it possible that if you do not have an active status, that you can then go and apply for proceedings in a court of law, and no one is any wiser that has happened? Because we have several cases today of individuals complaining about cases that have been taken up by an advocate who is not active, and taken money from them in several cases, and things have not been done, and they get the short end of the stick. Is it something that ought to be checked when, for example, because now I from what I understand, court cases are now all digital. And I assume that when you're putting in this information, that it would ask you for, as an advocate, your PC number.
Yeah.
And the system should then be able to tell offhand whether you are active or not. How then do we have that such cases still are able to be logged, and the individual who's handling your case as an advocate is not active? How would that happen?
We live in a society where crime can happen. Majority of the members of the legal profession, the one who practice law, it's very easy for you to check their active status by simply going to the Law Society of Kenya website and checking it out. Of course, in terms of improvements, we might need to do more. By, for example, we are in the digital era.
Yes.
If we have a new USSD code, which you can click, you dial, then you get the number of an advocate. So that is one of the improvements which we really need to push at the Law Society of Kenya. But there are criminals outside there who masquerade. They are actual criminals. They masquerade as legal practitioners. They are not admitted to the bar. Some of them don't have LLB degree, like Mr. Brian Mwenda. He doesn't have an LLB degree, but he masquerades as an advocate. So that is something which we need to look at it broadly from a societal perspective in terms of, one, sensitization. We need to tell members of the public that for you to hire an advocate, that advocate is required to be active with the Law Society of Kenya, and he must show you a practicing certificate for that particular year. It's actually a requirement. You can't file a case in court without indicating your PC. In fact, Brian Mwendwa was discovered by an advocate when he attempted to file pleadings in court. And then a diligent advocate noticed the pleadings and said, but the pleadings look weird. Let me confirm with the Law Society of Kenya. That's how he was discovered. But all along, he's been going around telling people he's an advocate. He moves. Actually, he can come to a forum where advocates are doing their work.
And he engages.
And then he engages
and
with
he
them.
sounds learned.
Absolutely. No, he doesn't sound learned.
And
Come on.
I must ask a question.
Yeah.
Before, and maybe Manwa, you can jump in here. Before this advocate found these proceedings to be a bit off color, had he not presented himself in court? And I think that's still related to my previous question, that who does the due diligence? Let's say somehow you job the system and you're able to put in pleadings or proceedings, nobody noticed, whatever, that your case is, because you said the system can take a little bit of tweaking, right? So you're able to get through that. In a court of law, before a magistrate or a judge, is there any kind of due diligence that happens when they're checking that these two individuals who are arguing cases before them have actually met the threshold for that particular proceeding in terms of their job? Is there anything like that, or does the magistrate or judge just assume that the people who are sitting before him or on that day should be in there?
No, I think the first thing that the Law Society has done is to create the website. And I think it's important for the public to also understand that before you instruct an advocate first, because before an advocate actually accesses a courtroom, they must receive instructions. We don't go to court to sit there. We go to court to prosecute cases. And so you will not expect anybody seated in court as an advocate, without and addressing court without instructions from a client. So once you're instructed, you prepare those pleadings. If you look at the pleadings that Brian filed in court, it's obvious. Any judicial officer who looks at those documents will, number one, want to know what is the P105 of this individual. And I think the judiciary has taken serious steps in actually ensuring that the people who appear before them are advocates. Because it's a click of a button and checking out, asking an advocate, what is your P105? For the record, my P105 is 14535/18.
But Manwa,
it is known.
Are you asked that every time you get into court?
You're not someone like Mr. Peter Wanyama, who's a senior. If he appears in court, obviously people know.
They know. Okay.
You know, we know Peter Wanyama.
A judge
But
who's been
a judge
on that bench will say, you have appeared before me before.
Yes, so they would
yes.
know.
And that
But for
alone would
somebody,
be-
And that alone would be an approval. But again,
But
we don't
still-
use
but
that.
still, it
We
doesn't
don't use
qualify
that.
you.
It doesn't qualify you.
You must maintain an active status.
And for me, I think most judicial officers have that tendency, especially if you appear before superior courts, from the High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court. They have a way of actually finding out before they appear before. If you
What
have
is
practiced
this way?
before the Court
That's
of Appeal,
the question is,
if
Manwa,
you have appeared before the Court of Appeal, you will find that before the court starts, they'll give you a document to fill in your name and your details before you address the court.
Okay.
The reason why they do that is so that they can ascertain that the individuals appearing before them are actually advocates and are active members of the law society.
So what is that process? So what
That
happens?
thing.
So
You have filled out the form, you've given it to the court clerk.
Yes.
What happens
The
next?
process is very simple. You realize the judicial officers, all of them are advocates first before
Yes.
they actually become judges and
Yes.
magistrates. And it's very easy for them to ascertain from the advocate's website that an individual is first an advocate, and then second, an active member. Active, as Senior said, you have to take a practicing certificate. Every year, you pay to the Law Society of Kenya, which money goes to actually the CRJ in the judiciary for purposes of a license.
I understand.
That I have licensed you to
Yeah.
practice. So they have two options, either to check you online,
Yes.
see whether your status is active. The second option is actually to call the Law Society.
Okay.
There is a toll number, and I believe it's still available, to call and ascertain the status of an individual.
I understand that, and that's
Yes.
fantastic. But the question is, do they? And why
And
I
that is-
ask that,
yes.
because it looks like we're splitting hairs, but I think it is critically important here
Yes.
because of what we're talking about, because of the hundreds of millions that are lost through court cases, through individuals. And I can bet you this Brian gentleman is not the only one who's done
It's
it
true.
or who is aspiring to do it. And that's why I'm saying, yes, we know those processes exist for these things, but do they actually happen? And why I'm asking that is there's a lot of conspiracy going around as to whether he tried cases, whether he argued cases in court, whether it was the first or the 26th time that he did it. If it was the 26th time that he did it, then there's a problem. And
Yes,
I think that ought to be addressed. Did it actually happen?
And I think that is why it's important to also separate these two institutions.
Yeah.
We are licensed to practice as advocates in courts and even out of courts. We have advocates who practice as conveyancers. The judiciary has an obligation, and the Law Society has an obligation too. The Law Society is an independent entity of members. The judiciary is a public office.
Sure.
And judicial officers have a duty to first, because we have what we call taking quorum. You have to take quorum. You remember, before you appear before a judge, you must actually
Kama roll call, kama ile,
state your name and who you are appearing for, so that the court can take that record.
You don't state your registration number.
You don't state, and I think we are heading there, because I think it's more important now that actually every advocate who appears must actually state the registration number. But I understand why sometimes you will find a judge has a course list of close to 40 matters. It will be very difficult to take a quorum in terms of P105s. But again, they take the names. So the indolence is on the part of the judicial officers to first of all ascertain that the individuals who appear before them. And I think most clients out here, the public should know that if you have an advocate who has no license, or who's not an advocate in the first place, who appears before a court of law, those proceedings, because most of the matters that we defend in court involve millions and millions of shillings.
Yes.
So if it's discovered at any stage that you actually purported to file those documents, conduct proceedings without being an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and having a PC, they are struck out. And you will waste your money.
The
will
case
go
is struck out.
the entire
case is struck
pleadings.
out, yeah.
The case is struck out.
Yeah, and let me just intervene also something to just beef up what he's saying. You know, cases are now done online. We appear in court virtually.
Yeah.
So there are dangers for masqueraders to purport to appear.
Yeah.
So what happens is that there's an e-filing system where you have to file your case virtually. The judiciary doesn't accept the physical copies of documents. So you as an advocate, you must have a profile under the judicial the judiciary's e-filing system. So that is important for you to weed out. If you got an advocate's office, and then he's telling you that I'm going to file a document in court, yet the courts don't accept physical documents.
So
Not that
physical
advocate,
documents
yeah,
are no
not
longer.
accepted. Yes, you file them virtually
For
And
all
then-
cases?
For all cases, and then when you appear in court as an advocate, because you must have a Microsoft account. For you to appear in court as an advocate virtually. And for you to appear in court, then you must put on your video for verification. Then as a rule also, you must sign in under your own personal account. So if you go to an advocate's office and then he's basic, one, he doesn't have a computer, then he's telling you he's attending court.
He's virtual.
Two, he's operating in a shady office. Three, he's an advocate who is, as in, you know, some of these things are perception.
Yeah.
You go to a quack's office, you will quickly identify a quack
Sure.
by looking at that person.
Boy.
So for the Law Society of Kenya, let me just explain. For the Law Society of Kenya, what we need,
They put up a show.
what we need is active public sensitization. Because, let me tell you something, and this might really shock you. You know, there are persons who will not appear in court.
Yeah.
Maybe they are quacks and their work is to sign
documents.
sell agreements.
Yeah.
So you, a member of the public, you have 1 million shillings, you want to buy a plot. And then you go to an advocate's office, advocates in court.
And commissioner
Yeah, you don't
forwards.
ask anyone. You have 1 million shillings. You don't even bother to call the LSK. And then you go to his office, you give him the 1 million. And then you say that he's acting for you in a transaction.
He signs and stamps.
Yeah, he signs and stamps using a fake stamp. And then you don't make the verification. Then you end up losing your money. So the issue is that these folks are criminals. And what the LSK has been doing is that we have a robust process which is ongoing to look for quacks. There are so many of them outside. They are quacks, not advocates. They sell as advocates, but they are quacks. They are stealing from the public. And at the end of the day, it creates a perception that lawyers are thieves. Yet lawyers are not thieves. So the issue is that we need to weed out this case. If you go to Mavoko here, just go to Mavoko. Chances are you might find a quack practicing in conveyancing, accepting money from members of the public. So what LSK does is that we have a compliance department, both at the national office and at the branch level, where we move and arrest these people, hand them over to the police, and then they are charged in court. The problem is that if sometimes you charge them here, then they resurface in another place. So we need a much more robust engagement on this issue to protect the public from losses, because there are many quakes, there are many thieves. You can't weed out society from these individuals. So what we need to tell members of the public is that really for you to deal with an advocate, please consult the Law Society of Kenya if you see one or two things which are not right. Yeah.
How
Just
can you
consult
tell
the
a lawyer
LSK.
is a lawyer?
Yeah.
So basically, I hear what you're saying, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, creating awareness to the public and making it very, very, very easy for somebody to basically just verify this is a lawyer who is current in their status. Okay? An advocate who is current, they have a compliance certificate, and I can tell just by doing this and the other in a system that does not have this person involved.
Yes.
This is one. But then there's also the society itself and the other arms of government. If, for example, it's a lands office, if wherever you have these lawyers or advocates coming in to act on behalf of their clients, maybe something needs to be instituted so that they can also help
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
innocent members of the public. Let's continue that conversation. We are talking about masqueraders, fake impersonators, and all in the legal profession. How can you tell a lawyer is a lawyer? First of all, look at their suit. If it's a striped suit, they're close to that. If they're wearing 2 watches, they're closer to that. If they're wearing a one big watch, it's close to that. If they're driving,
And if that watch is gold, but you are now confirmed.
Without a doubt.
if they're speaking big English, close, but you must even after you've done all those things, you must check.
But the
that they
chip
have
is
an
expensive.
Active PC.
Chip is expensive.
Chip
You'll find someone spending 200,000 shillings to buy a plot, and they never bother to confirm with a lawyer, a qualified lawyer, and they end up losing the money. Go to Nakuru. Many people have done. They go to they buy multi-million shillings property using non-lawyers. And then or persons who style themselves as lawyers, and you end up losing millions of shillings in terms of property. Look at what is happening in Athi River now in terms of demolition. Yes. What is happening there? You will find someone without going through a lawyer or maybe advised by a quake, they bought that property without doing a due diligence. And you can see the pain they are going through. You have invested 20 million in a house which goes down because you never bothered to invest 100,000 shillings with a qualified lawyer to check for you the status of that.
No, you did bother. You asked your friend who has also bought in neighboring plot. Uko na wakili gani? Tumia the same wakili. Same wakili.
Stamp for you.
Yeah, some of them are not genuine lawyers.
Okay, let's continue the conversation shortly. 9:30.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
About identifying masqueraders before you engage them to be your advocates and representing you in court. Somebody's asking a question. Okoiti Okia Umtata. Is he an advocate? Yet we see him in court. In fact, even to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court.
Yeah, maybe Manwa can take that.
Okia Koiti Omtata is a public interest litigation individual. I think one of the things that the public needs to understand is that any of us can institute proceedings before our courts, but not all proceedings. That any other person can be able to institute. Okia Omtata specializes on matters public interest, matters that touch on bread and butter, and I think that is the reason why he has been allowed to practice. And if you've bothered to check, you will find that Okia files petitions. And whereas an advocate who's admitted and practicing law files petitions too, they also file what we call plaints and different documents, of course, in a court of law. But Okia cannot file to represent you on a commercial matter. Okay. He can only file a petition before the High Court. And the Constitution of Kenya 2010 gives the public the leverage to approach the High Court, especially on public interest matters. Okia cannot practice in the magistrates' courts because they don't interpret the Constitution.
Okay.
He only files matters that actually seek to interpret the Constitution. So for that, the Constitution allows them to do that, from the High Court to the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court on matters that are public interest in nature. And that touch on a public interest question, and that does not involve receiving. So I don't think he receives instructions from anyone to file those matters.
What qualifies as public interest?
What qualifies as public interest? I will give an example of decisions that have been made by the president through executive order, for instance. You remember during the former regime, the Law Society was in court challenging executive orders to transfer judicial functions from the judiciary to ministries. There was the Kenya Meat Commission matter, transferring of the Kenya Meat Commission, the forest. There are so many questions of law that qualify as public interest in nature as opposed to commercial in nature, where there is someone who needs to actually gain from a transaction going wrong. For instance, a contract. Okia cannot actually go to court and challenge contractual issues against, of course, between parties or Kenyans. So that is the difference as between a public interest.
Do I hear you to be saying that matters that lean very heavily towards what you call public good?
Yes.
But are not necessarily commercial in nature or criminal or anything else?
Yes.
That alone specifically?
Yes.
Which therefore means that it's something that revolves around the interpretation of the Constitution on that same matter.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, actually what happens is that, there's a document known as the Constitution of Kenya.
Okay, that one.
So the Constitution of Kenya contains what lawyers and what the Constitution itself calls the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights are rights which members of the public have against the state. So the same Constitution says any person can move to court and protect the Bill of Rights. For example, the right to privacy. If the government is intercepting telecommunication information unlawfully, they're intervening on your privacy. So Okia Omtata, as a person who is authorized by the Constitution, can go to court and file a petition to protect the rights of the members of the public from violation by government. And he doesn't need to be an advocate. It is any person. What he can't do, what Okiya Mtata can do is that he can file a case under his own name. And he has done brilliantly in terms of just protecting the public interest. But he files under his own name.
As Okiya
Mtata. And the constitution allows him. And he appears in court in person. He cannot send an advocate to appear for him. If he does that, then he must cease appearing and appoint an advocate to represent him. So that's what happened. So Okiya Mtata has been filing public interest cases against the state. You will never see him in a commercial dispute because then where is the public interest?
Brayo so was appearing on behalf of other people.
No, Brian, what he did was wrong. He was, one is that he stole the identity of a qualified advocate and then put that in pleadings.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Pleadings. Number two is that then he purports to appear in court, and from our interactions with documentation, one is that he appeared in court about I think 2-3 times only.
Okay.
Two is that he purported to be an advocate. In one of the clips which is there online, he says, I appear for so and so. That's a very, very serious issue. That's why the DPP the other day ordered the Inspector General to investigate. Because it's a crime for you to purport to appear, yet you are not a qualified advocate.
I was going to ask, what kind of offense are we looking at?
Yeah,
here?
it's a criminal offense.
When this happens, so that's one part of it.
Yeah,
but then there's the other side of it where, again, the loss, the commercial loss, the resource loss that could happen as a result of somebody then posing as somebody else. So what kind of offenses are we looking at here?
There are about actually 5 offenses that this Brian is being investigated by the National Police Service. One is identity theft. You cannot purport to be someone, then you go online, then you take that person's identity. There's a real Brian who works at the State Law Office, who Brian stole his identity. That's a major criminal offense. Number two, under the Advocates Act, you cannot appear, purport to appear as an advocate without having been qualified. So that's another offense which the Advocates Act creates. And then under the Penal Code, even the documents he prepared, uttering a false document. You prepare a document. Yes. You prepare a false document, then you utter it to a judicial officer, purporting that to be a genuine document. That's a crime he has committed. So Brian is in trouble. Let him surrender. Let Sonko surrender him to the DCI as soon as possible so that he records a statement for purpose of prosecution. Because at the Law Society of Kenya level, advocates, we are really concerned about, he even comes out and does a Twitter post mocking us. We can't allow that. The position is that, we can't allow him mocking us. The position is that he's not an advocate. He's committed a criminal offense. Let him surrender himself to DCI as soon as possible so that he can be investigated through a due process. Let him be taken to court, and then he will plead, and then the state will prove charges against him. Because where he is, it is really very serious for you to act as an advocate, yet you are not qualified.
Can we clear up some cloudy issues here?
Yeah.
You talk about the fact that he then did appear in court a couple of times, and then the weight that it bore on that case, I think, is very important. And if you're going to ask yourself, then what were the outcomes of those particular cases where this identity theft took place, where purporting to obtain something in the presence of a judicial officer, etc., etc. What weight does it bear on those cases? Did it bear on those cases?
Yeah, let me clarify something first. Brian, contrary to the misinformation on Twitter, Brian has not won a single case.
Okay.
Yeah, winning a case is a process. Yeah, I think this is just by some Twitter folks who just jump on it as a leisure story, then they propagate, and then it's picked up by the mainstream. Brian has not won a single case in court.
All right.
But we confirm that he has appeared or purported to appear in some cases. What happens is that if you file a pleading and you are not qualified, and that pleading is in a case, so the court has an obligation then to strike out those pleadings from the file.
Okay.
And if you are a party then who hired Brian, who is not a qualified, then you must go to the drawing board and then hire a proper lawyer, because everything that you filed, everything that you filed in court will be struck out.
Okay.
The proceedings where he appeared, and if I am for the DPP, and he appeared in a criminal case. I will apply to strike out those proceedings because they are nullity. You cannot have a person who is not qualified purporting to represent an accused person or even to appear on record. So everything that he said, and it was recorded, it's then struck out from the record of the court. So those are the consequences for you appearing in court as a masquerader.
What happens to the person whom they were representing?
I don't think whether this gentleman was representing anyone. I think,
So
and
then
if
you have not committed an offense.
if you look at the video that is circulating, he appeared in mine and Jenga's case in court. He just showed up, and I think there's one of our colleague in the DPP who actually had a conversation with him initially. And obviously you can't stop people from coming to court. We have trainee lawyers who are doing internships and all that. So you will assume that probably these are students. But when you take your feet and stand up and start addressing court, he said, I'm on record.
Yes.
But he never mentioned, I'm on record for who? Because
Was
you
he
are
on
on record
record?
for someone, and you have to have written instructions. Actually, good practice is that actually a client has to give you written instructions.
Written instructions, yes.
So
That
in
you
this
have come on
particular
record,
case,
yes.
was he on record?
He entered on record because you see what we refer as on record is that if the judge starts writing, he will ask
That's
your
right.
names and you will mention your names
Yes.
and you will say, I'm so and so, I'm on record for so and so.
Yes.
I think from the video and out of that euphoria, the gentleman stood up and said, I'm equally on record. Because if you realize, some of these cases have quite a number of lawyers. And some seniors come with their junior colleagues in office to participate in those proceedings as part of learning. So it's not difficult for the court to actually take that quorum. But again, you purporting now to say that you're on record and addressing court, and then later on it's discovered that actually you are not an advocate in the first place, or you didn't get instructions. It is a professional offense. It's not even a professional because it's not even a professional in the first place. It's a quack. And so therefore, even the punishment that is given to advocates who are not active in practice is not given to him because it doesn't qualify, it doesn't have the LLB degree
And the complainant is
postgraduate
not
diploma.
The complainant, remember, is the LSK.
Yeah.
So the offense which he has committed is purporting to appear, and the complainant is the Law Society of Kenya.
Yeah.
Which is the regulator of the
The
profession.
regulator
Yes.
of the profession.
Yes. Yeah.
Umechezwa hapa bana.
Yeah. So, contrary to the public opinion, as Peter
Mpatieni
stated,
senior counsel. Huyu jamaa.
there is
No, he's
no
a criminal.
26 cases, and you see we have what we call in law citation.
Yeah.
What citation? What are these cases people are talking about? And I think most of the determinations made by the judiciary are posted at the Kenya law reports. And obviously, if you have determined a single case to finality, it takes a lot of time. And I think hearing a case from zero to the end to judgment, it's a process in itself.
It can take up to a year, actually.
And the gentleman indicates he stole an identity of someone who was admitted in 2022. It's not possible.
How can you win
practically
26
possible
cases
to win
within
26
a year?
cases
It's
within
impossible.
a year. It's
Ourselves,
not
we are established advocates, but you can't win 26 cases in a year. It's impossible, yeah.
You know, gentlemen, as you're saying, there are very many masqueraders in very many of the professions in Kenya.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the case of somebody who performed surgeries
A doctor, yeah.
as a doctor in a public hospital, yet he was not.
And the
qualified as a
policeman
doctor.
who was a
We
senior
have somebody who
assistant.
is a senior police officer who has never been employed as a police officer, and so on and so forth. This is something that is rampant across. But in a profession such as yours, which is clearly regulated, even the police, I mean, even the medical profession is clearly regulated. There is a way you get licensed and there are inspections and all. How does this happen?
Sometimes it happens. You have quacks who can fit in within the system. One, if you're lax. Then two, if
When
you,
the system is weak.
yeah, when the system is weak. So definitely we will need to, a Law Society of Kenya, we might need to improve our systems. We might need to improve our systems actually we must improve our systems on identification to build confidence from members of the public that our system is foolproof.
Sure.
Secondly, the platforms are now getting integrated. The immigration practice, it's getting integrated, insurance integrated, conveyancing. Nowadays, you must have an account with the Ministry for Lands, and the judiciary's e-filing system itself. So eventually, with convergence of technology, you will be able then to have only genuine advocates who are practicing. Then the rest, we can then weed them out. Then we also need to enhance surveillance to protect members of the public. No, it's very painful for a person who goes to a quake. You give that quake $500,000 to buy for you land, and then the following day you go back to his office. He's closed up. He disappeared with your money.
No
it's
longer
very
exists.
painful.
Yeah.
So we need to improve. We need to protect members of the public by one, doing proper surveillance and checks. Number two, public information. Like, this is an important forum we are engaging in. The public is able to listen that for you to hire a lawyer, that lawyer must have active status. So everyone who claims to be a lawyer may not necessarily be a lawyer. You must confirm with the Law Society of Kenya. And now we have branches throughout the country. So just go to like in Nakuru, there's a Law Society of Kenya office there. Mombasa, everywhere we have branches. So members of the public should be able to know that, please, not everyone who claims to be a lawyer is a lawyer.
He's a lawyer.
Can you can you
that's a
check with the
advocate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
So you
recourse-
don't lose money.
Sure. What recourse can you take, though, however? Because there are quite a number of people who've lost millions, especially when it comes to advocates handling the cases whereby an amount of money is supposed to be paid to a large group of people and the money is paid to the offices of the advocate. This happens over and over and over again. So what recourse do you take? Because this is it. Who do you report an advocate
I think
to?
I think
yeah,
there's a disciplinary mechanism that has been put in place by the Law Society of Kenya.
Yeah.
Remember, if you're an advocate and you receive money on behalf of the public
Clients,
for
yeah.
purposes of a transaction, and then you proceed to actually either use the money and you're reported at the. We have the Advocates Complaint Commission at the State Law Office, and we have the disciplinary committee under the Law Society, the tribunal under the Law Society. These two bodies actually, the members of the public go and report any advocate who has actually committed a professional offense. And that mechanism works because essentially if you gave me money for a certain work and I didn't do the work, you have a right as a member of the public to actually report me to those institutions. There are proceedings. You are told to come and defend yourself. If you don't, you're struck out. Or there are three disciplinary measures that have been put in place by the Law Society. Either you're warned, number two, you're suspended for some time, for 2-3 years, or you're struck out of the role of advocates.
Forever, yeah.
Forever. You can't
You
practice
can never
within
practice
the space.
again.
Those are the internal mechanisms. In terms of public mechanisms, and I think this is important because it goes beyond the Law Society, we have to look at the judiciary, let them play their part, that anybody who appears before them must actually identify. And I think nowadays there is a face, and even though that is the reason why we are here, someone actually stole someone's identity, I think that is really the much the Law Society could have done at the moment, to put a face and a P105 into the person, so that it's very easy for a judicial officer to actually fact check. It's a simple process to ascertain that the people appearing before me are actually advocates. In terms of transactions and contract writing, these are things that are done in offices. But the consequences come later when there's a dispute as to that. For instance, the purchase of land. If you look at a thrift and the demolitions, you will go, if you go back, you will find out that the advocate probably who drafted the documents was not a professional, because as a professional you must do due diligence, and one of the due diligence is to find out whether this is actually public land that you are purchasing. Those are basic things, and I think as Peter said, the public assumes that any person, as long as a number has been shared to me, is a lawyer. You assume they are lawyers. You give them assignments, which assignments obviously will have an effect later on. If it was an advocate who committed that offense, and I can tell you right now, that offense of actually overseeing a transaction which was on public land, the Law Society of Kenya alone, that advocate is liable individually for committing the offense. He did not do due diligence to actually advise their clients accordingly that this is public land.
How often are lawyers arrested over such offenses?
Actually, they are arrested all the time. There are serious matters before superior courts where lawyers were actually...
How many lawyers are arrested over such offenses?
Let me say something here. You know, what he raised was a fundamental issue. There's a difference between a quack committing a crime as purporting to be a qualified person, and a real advocate, qualified, committing a crime. So it happens. Sometimes there are cases where a qualified advocate handles clients' money, and then that advocate misappropriates clients' money. So then, what are the remedies for that particular client? I believe that's what you wanted to find out. So the remedy, as Mr. Mana has said, is that members of the public need to know that the legal profession in Kenya is regulated. No one, even if you are an advocate, you can get away with committing a crime. What happens is that we have the Advocates Disciplinary Tribunal, where an advocate who has committed a crime, apart from being arrested by the police and charged in court, because you can be arrested. If you steal clients' money, you'll be arrested for theft and taken to court, then you are taken to jail as an advocate. Apart from that, then you also have the advocate's disciplinary process. That process, you are subjected through, you are prosecuted by Law Society of Kenya through that tribunal. And then when you are found guilty, depending on the level of offense, some offenses may be minor, so they can say we suspend you from the role of advocate for 5 years. Others are serious, like theft of funds. If you steal clients' money and you are an advocate, you will be struck off. Struck off means you will never qualify as an advocate. Never practice again. And members of the public also need to check with the LSK, because there's that database. If you have been struck out. And LSK usually publishes this in the Kenya Gazette. So what we need to do is maybe tell members of the public in a more robust manner that so and so is no longer an advocate. Don't trust him with
in the Gazette
with transactions. So we need more public information. We need to educate members of the public about the legal profession. The other mechanism is under the Advocates Complaints Commission. It's at the AG's office. If a lawyer has misappropriated your money and you have a complaint, the legal sector is well regulated. It is checked. Just go to any Attorney General's office in any part of the republic. They will advise you that if you have a complaint, go put it in writing. We'll forward it to the Advocates Complaints Commission. And most of these complaints which are taken to the Advocates Complaints Commission and the Advocates Disciplinary Tribunal, if you're a lawyer, you usually attempt to settle them because they are serious. It's taking away your bread. That means you must settle. You must settle that issue. If it's money, you must really refund. So the legal sector, members of the public need to know, is really regulated. It's a legal sector where there are no quacks. If the quacks are there, then they're operating outside the legal mechanism, which they are there. And we are saying members of the public need to help us. If an advocate is not appearing as an advocate, like you go to a place like Ruiru, or Kimilili, where I come from. You go in, that advocate, first of all, is coming in the office drunk, smelling alcohol. He's not styling himself as an advocate. As I said, he has no computer. He's telling you that he's attending a case virtually, yet he has no computer. And then you trust that advocate with 1 million shillings. That is definitely a quack. So members of the public need to know that Law Society of Kenya, all they need to do is to go to Bungoma Law Society of Kenya if you're in Kimilili, check with LSK in Bungoma, the branch, is so and so an advocate I can trust. Then LSK, because the advocates who are there, they'll quickly check and they'll confirm that advocate is qualified, then they will tell you, please go and transact. But if you have misgivings and the person is a quack, please don't. Especially if someone who has been arrested, like now Brian. Brian is definitely a quack. So let no member of the public engage with Brian. You will lose money.
Again, there are very many cases. You've actually done well to say going to Ruiru, going to Kimilili. In many of these rural areas, people don't know who's a lawyer, who's not. There's a certain office there, this person. Not all lawyers are advocates. Not all advocates are commissioners of oath or notaries public. But you go in and this guy gives you the full suite of services because you're somewhere in Kimilili, you needed to sign an affidavit to file so that you want to change your name. This guy has gone and done everything for you, letter pesa. Then you realize later that you're dealing with a quack.
With a quack, yeah.
I don't know what I'm asking.
Ignorance is not a defense.
Well, yes.
You have a duty. And you see the law society has devolved. We have branches across the country. To the extent that if you're in Kimilili...
I have to stop you right there.
Yes.
We know all that. You also have the duty. You're the duty bearers.
Yes.
It is you
and that's
lawyers.
why I'm saying.
It is you who should tell us, beyond telling us an office exists.
Yes.
You should tell us the mechanisms you've set in place to inform people. The same applies to doctors. The same applies to architects.
I was coming there.
That's actually the point I was making before I finished. Was we have very many people who call themselves doctors in these villages, who are maybe a guy who went to KMTC, did pharmacy. Or a guy who worked in a hospital as a nurse, and then now he's come here and he's opened like a facility and he's doing all manner of things.
He's wearing a lab coat.
And he charges money.
Yes.
It's upon the professional
Yeah.
regulators
Absolutely.
to actually go in there and do.
I think it's a shared responsibility. If we say that it's upon the profession 100% to actually ensure that they weed out these quacks, it will be wrong. Because essentially, as a citizen, you have a duty to also find out basics. And I said, he asked a very good question. Do we ensure that actually these people within these villages know that there is a structured way of actually
If you
finding
can
whether
demonstrate that.
Yes.
Then
And
the
that-
honors will no longer
Public
be on you.
information.
Yes. And that's why I said that these branches that the Law Society have, and I think there are sessions that every branch has. And
Clinics,
clinics within those regions to sensitize the public as to who
He's a lawyer.
who is a lawyer. And again, the Law Society requires that you have a registered office. You cannot actually be a street lawyer because you are admitted.
Office too.
Yes, an office, the essence of an office.
I think what you are saying, Eric, is that going forward, we need to do more in terms of public education.
That's the point.
Yes.
Public education. We need members of the public to engage more with Law Society of Kenya.
Yes.
How do we engage? We need to go on radio doing public forums, and more importantly, we do law clinics.
Yes.
Law clinics
And
is where
lawyers should call out masqueraders among your profession because it's
Absolutely.
easier for you.
Absolutely.
That guy with the office there's a lawyer who will come and say, "Uni fake."
Absolutely.
Yes, deal.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Peter Wanyama and Manwa Hosea are advocates of the High Court of Kenya. They've been our guests. Thank you very much for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation. Tomorrow is Tuesday. We'll be here. Have a
Your
lovely day.
life. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.